Today I'm going to try to prove to you that you do not need to buy a new computer, you don't need to buy a new camera to start making videos on YouTube. Hey everybody, welcome back to A Better Computer. My name is Matt, and like I said, I am going to show you how I do all my videos for this on a Mac Mini. Not one of the new ones. You've probably seen a lot of videos lately about the new Mac Minis from Apple that use the M1 processor and are great values and everything, but this Mac Mini over my shoulder right here, this is the 2012 Mac Mini. It's not even a souped up one, it is the baseline one from 8 years ago, and I use it to make most videos on this channel. So I'm making this video because I wanted to show how I make videos on old hardware. Like, none of the stuff I use is stuff a high-end YouTuber would use. And I think we see a lot of these videos from creators who are like, I'm using the super high-end DSLR, I'm using a Mac Pro, I'm getting the cinema display because this makes me work better. And absolutely, better tools can make you do better work, but you don't need those, especially to get started. And so I'm filming this on a 6-year-old RX 100. It's the RX 100 Mark III, which is a good camera, but is definitely out of date at this point. And this Mac Mini behind me is 8 years old. It's the 2012 model. It's not the new ones. It's not the super fancy ones. It's super slow. And so I wanted to show you kind of the specs of this device, how it works for me with my editing flow, and then some of the limitations that it has. So let's take a look. So in terms of specs, this is the $599 model from 2012. It was late 2012, and it comes with an Intel Core i5 processor. It's a dual core processor. It was their mobile version of that chip. I don't have the exact category it was or anything, but it's a dual core. It's not super powerful, especially by today's standards. It also shipped with 4 gigabytes of RAM and a 500 gigabyte spinning hard drive. There's some other specs, but they don't really matter. I've made 2 upgrades to it over the years that have really extended its lifetime. I would not be using it today without these updates, so that's definitely a caveat here. But I'm using a 512 gigabyte SSD that I upgraded. That was a huge upgrade that added years to its life. And then I've also upgraded the 4 gigabytes of RAM up to 16 gigs. And so that has given me some breathing room to actually do some of this work, which probably wouldn't be doable at all, or would not be fun at the very least on 4 gigabytes. But again, this is still an 8-year-old processor, 8-year-old everything else. In terms of ports, it's actually pretty good. It has 4 USB-A ports. It has a Thunderbolt 1.0. So this is the original one that has like the display port form factor and everything. It has some FireWire on the back, SD card, HDMI. It has these things, has a headphone jack and a line in separately. So there's tons of I/O, but ultimately it's a lower power machine, very low power. And again, this was the cheapest Mac Apple made 8 years ago. So consider that. The odds are whatever you have around is at least as solid as this device. Maybe not, but odds are pretty good it is. So I do most of my editing in Final Cut Pro and some in ScreenFlow. Those are the apps I use. If you're using Premiere, Adobe Premiere, or DaVinci Resolve, I would not recommend using an old computer like this. It's really choppy, it's really hard to use. I've tried it, it's not good. So I would stick with Final Cut Pro, ScreenFlow, iMovie even. Those are much more optimized to the Mac and run much better. So these old pieces of hardware run them much smoother. And so basically I shoot in 1080p, 24 FPS. Sometimes I do screen recordings at 60 FPS at 4K. And so those are a little harder to run, but the machine handles all of this pretty darn well. It plays back 1080p footage super smoothly. My timeline is really nicely handled in both of them. If I do shoot 4K like on my iPhone for something, it doesn't handle that as well. It doesn't play that back as smoothly, but it's pretty decent still and is still workable. It's not ideal. If I was a professional studio, I would say this was not good enough, but for me, as someone doing this part-time on YouTube, it's not a big deal. But that's not to say that this is perfect by any means. I'm not saying that this is everything that you want it to be. When you're watching this in iStat menus, basically anything you do, the CPUs go to 100%. And so everything is pushing this to its limits. Even launching like system preferences, launching your browser, all of this takes up all the power it has. And it happens, fast enough, but it's definitely not as snappy as you would expect from a modern computer. Additionally, those beach balls, those happen kind of a lot. And so I have an SSD, everything is pretty decent, but it's doing some big operations that are CPU bound and the CPU just can't always keep up. So it's definitely a thing that I feel, even though I can do everything, I definitely feel that limitation pretty frequently. Also, in terms of output, that FireWire port, or not FireWire, the Thunderbolt port that uses mini display port maxes out doing 60 FPS or 60 hertz, at 1600p at 2560 by 1600. You can actually do 2 monitors that way, but that's as high as you can go at 60 hertz, which I would describe as bare minimum. It can output at 4K through that port, but it only does 30 hertz, which is, in my experience, really hard to use. I've tried to do it. It's not worth it. I would rather use a lower resolution at a regular standard 60 FPS. Then there's issues just with old hardware. The headphone jack appears to be broken on mine. I can't output the sound to anything through that port, which is super annoying. So I either have to listen through the internal speaker, which is terrible and super soft and not good enough at all for video production, even standard stuff that I'm doing. So I actually have to, I use the internal speaker while I'm editing, and then to confirm it, I actually have it AirPlay to a HomePod, which is just, it's I feel real bad for saying that, but that's how when I play back and like check my volumes or check my levels, I'm doing it through a HomePod that's over Bluetooth and is lagging like 2 seconds behind the video that I'm seeing on screen. It's so bad, but that's what I'm doing to get around that. And then the big thing for me is that this doesn't support, or sorry, Apple doesn't support this anymore. So this is running Catalina. It's not running Big Sur because Big Sur doesn't exist for it. They cut it off this year, and so there will be no more software updates. There will be like security patches here and there, but in terms of actually updating to the new things, the new features that Apple's adding, that's over. And so that's kind of unfortunate and is going to become more and more of a problem as time goes on. So that's a big limiter. So the M1 Mac is in my future. I definitely want to get one. I'll almost certainly get one this year. But I just wanted to say, I wanted to make this video because I think it's important to see not everyone's using super high-end hardware. Not everyone is spending thousands and thousands of dollars to make their videos. A lot of us are using the stuff we already had. I already had this point and shoot. That's what I'm using. I'm not thinking about upgrading my camera anytime soon, although I'd love to. Obviously, I love new gear, but I'm not going to because it's good enough. This old Mac Mini that I've been using for this entire channel's life is good enough. It's like I said, there's definitely some issues. It's less good enough than the camera, but it's doing the job that it's supposed to do, and it's helping me get my work done. And so just remember that before you start thinking, I can't do this because I need to buy this. Consider what you already have. You probably have more access to do whatever you want than you think you do. So thank you so much for watching. I'll see you here next time. Bye-bye.